Hello, second grade. Okay, so I have a different book today. I so love this book, and there is a lesson that I want to teach you today that this book does an amazing job of helping us learn, okay? So I'm going to read Ivan 2, but I'm going to read this first, and there's going to be 2 reading videos today. You'll watch this first, and this is where the lesson and the teaching is, and then the Ivan will just be for some good fun, okay? Okay, so here's what I want to teach you. Authors use words in a way that sometimes we have to stop and think, what is she or he trying to tell us? I'm going to get to that part in this story, and we'll stop and talk about it. This book is by Anne Cameron. Julian's World, the stories that Julian tells. This boy on the front is Julian. There are several books. If you love this and you want to get some of these, I just bought mine off of Amazon because I left my copy of this at school. Okay, so I do love this story. Okay, the very first one is The Pudding Like a Night on the Sea. That's the name of the chapter. The Pudding Like a Night on the Sea. Do you think that the author really means they're having pudding on the sea? I don't know. I'm going to make something special for your mother, my father said. My mother was out shopping. My father was in the kitchen, looking at the pots and the pans and the jars of this and that. What are you going to make? I said. A pudding, he said. My father is a big man with wild black hair. When he laughs, the sun laughs in the window panes. When he thinks, you can almost see his thoughts sitting on all the tables and chairs. When he is angry, me and my little brother Huey shiver to the bottom of our shoes. What kind of pudding will you make? Huey said. A wonderful pudding, my father says. It will taste like a whole raft of lemons. It will taste like a night at the sea. Then he took down a knife and sliced 5 lemons in half. He squeezed the first one. Juice squirted in my eyes. Stand back, he said, and he squeezed again. The seeds flew on the floor. Pick those up, Huey, he said. Huey took the broom and swept them up. My father cracked some eggs and put the yolks in a pan and the whites in a bowl. He rolled up his sleeve and pushed back his hair and beat up the yolks. Sugar, Julian, he said, and I poured the sugar. He went on beating. Then he put in lemon juice and cream and set the pan on the stove. The pudding bubbled, and he stirred it fast. Cream splashed on the stove. Wipe that up, Huey, he said, and Huey did. You see the picture? It was hot by the stove. My father loosened his collar and pushed at his sleeves. The stuff in the pan was getting thicker and thicker. He held the beater up high in the air. Just right, he said. He sniffed and he smelled and smelled the pudding. He whipped the egg whites and mixed them into the pudding. The pudding looked softer and lighter than air. Done, he said. He washed all the pots, splashing water on the floor, and wiped the counter so fast his hair made circles around his head. Perfect, he said. Now I'm going to take a nap. If something important happens, bother me. If nothing important happens, don't bother me. And the pudding is for your mother. Leave the pudding alone. He went to the living room and he was asleep in a minute, sitting straight up in his chair. Huey and I guarded the pudding. It's a wonderful pudding, Huey said. With waves on the top like the ocean, I said. I wonder how it tastes, Huey said. Leave the pudding alone, I said. If I just put my finger in there, I'll know how it tastes, Huey said. And he did it! You did it, I said. How does it taste? It tastes like a whole raft of lemons, he said. It tastes like a night on the sea. You made a hole in the pudding, I said. But since you did, I'll have to taste. And it did. It tasted like a whole night of lemons. It tasted like floating at the sea. It's such a big pudding, Huey said. It can't hurt to have a little more. Since you took more, I'll have more, I said. That was the That was a bigger lick than I took, Huey said. I'm going to have more. Whoops, I said. You put in your whole hand, Huey said. Look at the pudding spilled on the floor. I'm going to clean it up, I said, and I took the rag from the sink. That's not really clean, Huey said. It's the best I can do, I said. Look at the pudding, Huey said. It looked like craters on the moon. We have to smooth this over, I said, so it looks the way it did before. Let's get spoons. And we evened the top of the pudding with the spoons. And while we evened it, we ate some more. There isn't much left, I said. We were supposed to leave the pudding alone, Huey said. We'd better get away from here, I said. We ran into our bedroom and crawled under our bed. After a long time, we heard my father's voice. Come into the kitchen, dear, he said. I have something for you. What is it? My mother said. Under the bed, Huey and I pressed ourselves against the wall. Look, said my father, out in the kitchen, a wonderful pudding. Where is the pudding? My mother said. Where are you boys? My father said. His voice went through every crack in every corner in the house. We felt like two leaves in a storm. Where are you? I said. My father's voice was booming. Huey whispered to me, I'm scared. We heard my father walking slowly through the rooms. Huey, he called. Julian. We could see his feet. He was coming into our room. He lifted the bedspread. There was his face, and his black eyes, black like lightning. He grabbed us by the legs and pulled. Stand up, he said. We stood. What do you have to tell me? He said. We went outside, Huey said, and when we came back, the pudding was gone. Then why are you hiding under the bed? My father said. We didn't say anything. We looked at the floor. I can tell you one thing, he said. There's going to be some beating here now. There's going to be some whipping. The curtains at my window were shaking. Huey was holding my hand. Go into the kitchen, my father said, right now. We went into the kitchen. Come here, Huey, my father said. Huey walked towards him, his hands behind his back. See those eggs? My father said. He cracked them and put the yolks in the pan and set the pan on the counter. He stood a chair by the counter. Stand up here, he said to Huey. Huey stood on the chair by the counter. Now it's time for your beating, my father said. Huey started to cry. His tears fell into the egg yolks. Take this, said my father. My father handed him the egg beater. Now beat those eggs, he said, and I want this to be a good beating. Oh, Huey said, and he stopped crying. He beat the egg yolks. Now you, Julian, stand here, my father said. I stood on the chair by the table. I hope you're ready for your whipping. I didn't answer. I was afraid to say yes or no. Here, he said. He set the egg whites in front of me. I want these whipped and whipped well. Yes, sir, I said, and I started whipping. My father watched us. My mother came into the kitchen and watched us. After a while, Huey said, Whew, this is hard work. That's too bad, my father said. Your beating is not done. And he added sugar and cream and lemon juice to Huey's pan and put the pan on the stove. And Huey went on beating. My arm hurts from all the whipping, I said. That's too bad, my father said. Your whipping is not done. So I whipped, and Huey beat, and he beat. Hold the beater in the air, Huey, my father said. Huey held the beater in the air. See, my father said, a good pudding stays on the beater. It's thick enough now. Your beating is done. And then he turned to me. Let's see those egg whites, Julian. They were puffy and fluffy. Congratulations, Julian, he said. Your whipping is done. He mixed the egg whites into the pudding himself. Then he passed the pudding to my mother. A wonderful pudding, she said. Would you like some, boys? No, thank you, we said. She picked up the spoon. Why, this tastes like a whole raft of lemons, she said. This tastes like a night at the sea. That's the end of that chapter. I want to talk about some of the really good language that the author used in this book. So, he several times in this chapter, one of the characters, either Julian or Huey or Mom, say, this pudding tastes like a night at the sea. What does the author mean there? Does the author mean that they're sitting on a boat in the middle of the sea? Let's think about that. When the author says this tastes like a night at the sea, I think what the author is saying that a night at the sea is peaceful and quiet and soothing, and I think that that's what the comparison is that the author is making. She is saying when you have this pudding, it's going to make you feel calm and relaxed and happy, like you were on the sea, like a night at the sea. There's another one in here I wanted to go back to. Let's see, it was way back here. Oh, when he thinks, you can almost see his thoughts sitting, when he thinks, you can almost see his thoughts sitting on all the tables and the chairs. So the author, when we think, can you see anything? No, of course not. But they know, Huey and Julian, they know their father so well that when he thinks, they can almost see what he's thinking. They kind of, he's got these big thoughts, and Julian and Huey know him so well that they kind of understand what he might be having going on in his head. Let's see, there were so many good ones in this. And of course the whipping and the beating. When I first read that, I bet you all thought, uh-oh, Miss Dana, what kind of book are you reading us? But then when we found out that they were just going to whip the eggs and beat the eggs, it didn't feel so bad, right? But Julian and Huey were a little concerned about that too. Okay, so I just want you to start thinking, when an author's saying something and we are readers and we get to that part, sometimes it makes sense to stop and say, what does the author really mean by that? So that is what I want you to think about as you are doing your reading out there in the world, okay? I hope you enjoyed that story. That was a fun one. I will have time to read more of those stories to you. The next one is about a catalog cat, and it's a really fun one too, and there's lots of good information in that book, or in that chapter, that little story that we have to think about too. All right, so Julian's World. I'll see you later, and I will be back to read some Ivan to you in just a bit. Bye.